Just before we start the video, I'm excited to announce that the Lazy Masquerade plush is now officially on sale. I personally designed these little creeps with the team over at U2's, and the final product is better than I ever imagined. They're high quality and super detailed. Complete with my avatar's Japanese Hanyu mask, dusty pinstripe suit, disheveled hair, and colour scheme, this devilishly cute, limited edition plush is the perfect companion to snuggle up in bed with this spooky season. And when I say they're limited, I really mean it. Once these channel mascots sell out, they'll be gone for good, so grab them while they're still hot over at u2s.com. Click the link down in the description or comment section, and let the spirit of Halloween into your heart with this Oni demon, who you just can't help but love. Japan's an extremely safe country with a low crime rate, but when a crime does occur there, the perps always seem to crank things up to 11. With that in mind, let's kick today's video off with a grim story that's not for the faint of heart. It was the 23rd of May, 1979. Keiko Mizuno, 32, and Eiko Akashi, 43, were two housewives who lived in the small and sleepy city of Nagao-Kakyo. Despite their 11-year age gap, both Keiko and Eiko were close friends and worked together part-time at a supermarket located in front of Nagaoka Tenshin train station. Sometime between 10 and 11 AM, the pair finished their morning shift and set off on their bicycles to visit a bracken grove on Noyama Mountain. There, they planned to gather up some warabi, a fern used to make a delicious mochi dessert which they planned to gift to their friends and family. For reference, Noyama Mountain isn't exactly the wilderness you may have pictured in your mind. In fact, the bamboo grove was only a couple of kilometers from the supermarket they had clocked off from, and was a popular spot for locals to gather plants and shoots. Keiko and Eiko left their bicycles at the foot of the mountain and walked up the pathway to the grove, arriving sometime around noon. Neither of them would ever come back down alive. That afternoon, Keiko's husband received a call informing him that his wife hadn't picked up their son from nursery school. He was of course concerned to hear that. With this being 1979, he didn't exactly have a way to contact Keiko. As such, he went to search for her up on the bracken grove where he knew she had gone to that day with Eiko, but he couldn't find any trace of either woman. When neither Keiko or Eiko returned home the following morning, both of their husbands finally reported them missing. 50 firefighters and a pack of sniffer dogs combed Noyama Mountain in search of the two missing housewives, but all they could find were their bicycles, still where they had left them. It wouldn't be until 10:30 AM on the 25th, a full 2 days after Keiko and Eiko went missing, that their bodies were finally discovered, lying just 10 meters apart in a heavily wooded area on Noyama. Both women had been slaughtered, but in vastly different ways. Keiko had been stabbed more than 50 times with a sharp kitchen knife. The blade had been left embedded in her chest. Her lungs, heart, and several other organs had been punctured. She had been left undressed from the waist down, and her jeans, underwear, and shoes were found close to her body. As for Eiko, she had been strangled to death. None of her clothes had been removed, but traces of the perp's bodily fluids were found on her remains. From those fluids, it was determined that the killer's blood type was O. Though both women had ultimately met their ends through different violent means, both Keiko and Eiko suffered similar wounds prior to their deaths. They had both been repeatedly punched and kicked, and had suffered numerous broken bones and bruises. Eiko had been so severely beaten that her liver had ruptured. These injuries had been caused by someone strong, possibly someone with martial arts training. The most gruesome detail, though, was that both Keiko and Eiko's Achilles tendons had been sliced through to the bone to prevent them from escaping. And this was likely one of the first wounds each woman sustained. From there, they were at their killer's mercy, unable to run or even walk to safety. Experts believe that the attack took place sometime between 12 PM and 2:30 PM. Empty bento boxes found inside the women's rucksacks suggested that they had both had time to eat lunch prior to the incident. Investigators searched the pockets of both victims. Inside Eiko's right jeans pocket, they found a crumpled up supermarket receipt. Turns out that she had left detectives a final clue. Scribbled on the back of the receipt, in Eiko's handwriting, was this message: "We're being followed. Please help us. This man is a bad person." The fact that the message had been written so sloppily, with certain simple kanji strokes being missed out completely, suggested that Eiko had written the note under extreme duress. They theorized that she planned to secretly hand the note to a passerby, but obviously never got the chance. The pencil used to write the note was the only item missing from the scene. None of the women's other possessions had been taken. This hadn't been a robbery gone wrong. This had been the work of an opportunistic sadist. Or perhaps, sadists. A construction team were present in the area that day. Two young workers, referred to as K and M by the media, were allegedly seen rushing down the mountain around 2 PM, just around the time the women were slain. These men were said to be Yankees, the word Japanese people use for juvenile delinquents. One of these men, K, was also said to practice karate. They were both questioned, but ultimately cleared as suspects in the case. So if K and M weren't responsible for the slayings, who was? Well, there are a few theories. As well as the builders, a further 15 people are known to have been on the mountain in the days preceding Keiko and Eiko's untimely and brutal ends. One of them is of particular interest. Just 6 days before the killings, a middle-aged man was seen speaking to a woman about warabi ferns. This man was described as being a salaryman type, and was wearing a polo shirt, smart trousers, and leather office shoes. Not the sort of outfit you'd expect someone to be wearing on a hike up the mountains. His attire was of interest to the authorities though, since a set of footprints found near Keiko and Eiko's bodies had been made by a pair of shoes without any indentations or patterns on the soles. Say, by a pair of office shoes. Half a year prior to the slayings, a male, aged between 40 and 45, had reportedly harassed a woman on Noyama Mountain, about 300 meters from where Keiko and Eiko would later be discovered. This man was approximately 5'7", had a strong build, and was dressed in grey work clothes with a peaked cap. He called out to the woman, saying something along the lines of, "Hey honey, have you managed to harvest any ferns?" Noticing that he was holding a 30-centimeter long blade in his hand, the woman ran to her husband, who was picking ferns a short distance away with their child. They later contacted the authorities about the incident. This sketch of the man was released to the public, but his identity remains a mystery to this day, and it's unknown whether he was the same salaryman type witnessed on the mountain shortly before Keiko and Eiko were slain. Around that same time in 1978, Akiko Maeda, a 38-year-old woman who had been jogging at night, disappeared just 10 kilometers from where the two housewives were slain. Her remains have never been found, but a long blood trail found at the scene suggested that she had been dragged into a vehicle and disposed of elsewhere. Could this have been the work of the same killer? 5 years after the Bracken murders, almost to the day in fact, on May 16th, 1984, 48-year-old Kyoko Kinoshita was found stabbed to death in the same city of Nagao-Kakyo, this time inside her own home. She had been punctured in the back and neck before being wrapped up in a futon. Whoever took her life then set that futon ablaze. O-type blood was again found at the scene. The eeriest part? Kyoko just so happened to work at the exact same supermarket as Keiko and Eiko. I've also seen some reports claim that Kyoko was actually with Keiko and Eiko on the mountain the day they were slain, but fortuitously went back home after eating lunch with them, effectively cheating death, at least for 5 years. Since I can't find any concrete evidence that Kyoko was actually with the 2 other housewives that day, I can only assume that last part's an urban rumor. Regardless, it's strongly believed that Kyoko's case and that of Keiko and Eiko's are linked. And, just like Keiko and Eiko before her, Kyoko's slaying also remains unsolved. Japan's famous for a lot of things. Amazing food, scenic landscapes, 8-day work weeks, but few things are more Japanese than vending machines. Sure, they're not exclusive to the country by any means, but an astonishing number of these contraptions line the country's streets, from the biggest city to the humblest little town. Personally, I was once caught in a blizzard on top of a mountain there, trapped in my friend's car for hours, awaiting rescue. And wouldn't you know, there just so happened to be a vending machine right outside the car that kept us fed and watered. It truly is the land of convenience. But, unfortunately, when a place has a good thing going, there's always someone out there who wants to ruin it. This is the story of the vending machine serial killer. April 1985, Fukuyama, Hiroshima. A 45-year-old man stopped by a vending machine to quench his thirst. Atop the machine, he found an unopened bottle of Oronomin C, a popular fizzy drink. After quickly inspecting the bottle, he considered it to be a freebie and took it home with him. There, he popped it open and enjoyed it. But that would turn out to be a fatal decision. The man soon began suffering from intense stomach cramps and was rushed to hospital. His vomit was examined, and doctors discovered that the man had somehow consumed paraquat, a toxic herbicide used by gardeners to kill weeds and unwanted plants. Consuming a mere drop of paraquat burns holes in the drinker's throat and invariably results in lung congestion and death. There's no antidote. It's an extremely painful way to go, and for this unfortunate 45-year-old truck driver, that's the way he went. He passed on May 2nd, his final days being nothing but agony. Now, you don't need to be a detective to work out how the paraquat got into the man's stomach. The Oronomin C. Somebody had injected the herbicide through the screw top. Most people at the time didn't realize that this had been an intentional murder though, and in the minds of many, including the authorities, the man's death was simply a one-off. Perhaps he had ingested the paraquat deliberately, a dramatic way to end his own existence. In Japan, that wasn't unheard of. And so, for the rest of the country, vending machines were nothing to be afraid of. But that all changed 5 months later, in September. On the 11th of that month, a 52-year-old man purchased a bottle of Oronomin C in Izumisano. As he bent down to collect his drink, he found a second bottle lying in the dispenser. He gathered up both bottles and drank them, and, as you can guess, perished 3 days later. Paraquat was again found in his system and inside one of the bottles. He had just fallen victim to the same death trap as the truck driver 5 months prior. The incident back in April had, in all likelihood, been nothing more than a test run for the killer, and now that they knew their methodology worked, they were about to up the ante. At this point, you may be wondering why both of these men would drink from seemingly abandoned bottles. Well, it's not actually as weird as it sounds. At the time, Oronomin C happened to be running a campaign. For every bottle of their drink purchased at a vending machine, there was a chance that an extra bottle would be dispensed for free. The odds of winning an extra beverage were actually quite high. As Steosphere noted in their excellent write-up of this case over on the Unsolved Mysteries subreddit, there was a widespread pay-it-forward culture in Japan at the time, and so it wasn't uncommon to visit a vending machine and find that some generous soul had left his or her extra bottle behind for the next passerby. Unfortunately, the killer was aware of this, and that September he took advantage of his fellow countrymen's trusting nature. On the 12th of September, just one day after the second victim had consumed his fatal beverage, a 22-year-old male in Matsusaka purchased a bottle of real gold, another popular soft drink, and found a second bottle in the dispenser. Little did he realize that this second bottle had been poisoned, this time with diquat, another toxic herbicide. He perished 2 days later. On the 19th, a 30-year-old male in Echizen found an unattended bottle of soda at a vending machine and drank it. He died 3 days later. A 45-year-old man in Miyakonojo also died that same day after drinking an abandoned bottle of real gold which he had found in a vending dispenser. A 50-year-old male perished in early October after drinking from a bottle of Oronomin C which he had found in a machine in Habikino. 4 more men also died in October after ingesting paraquat poisoned drinks. Soon, the similarity between all of these cases caught the media's attention, and people began avoiding vending machines altogether. The slayings finally came to an end in November, but not before 2 final victims lost their lives. This time, a 48-year-old man in Saitama and a 17-year-old girl in the Kodama district. She was the only female victim of the vending machine killer. The government began placing warning signs on every vending machine throughout the country, telling people not to drink from left-behind beverages. The manufacturers of Oronomin C replaced their bottle screw caps with pull tabs, and the general public were now much more weary about the dangers of abandoned consumables. Either as a result of greater public awareness, or for an entirely different reason altogether, the poisonings came to an abrupt stop after the first female victim perished. During their investigation, the detectives first had to confirm that all of the poisonings had been the work of one individual. As mentioned, all of the victims had been killed by drinks laced with paraquat. That is, all but one of them, the third victim, who had been poisoned with diquat. That was the only discrepancy in the perp's modus operandi. Otherwise, the killer's work was remarkably consistent. Too consistent not to be the work of one person. For example, the perp had only ever left poisoned bottles in quiet areas with no CCTV cameras. He had left them at machines dotted all over the map and clearly had no connection to the people whose lives he was taking. He had never been seen by any witnesses leaving his deadly concoctions behind. He had never once tried to contact the police to brag about his actions, and hadn't left behind any notes to taunt the families of the victims or to make any demands. He had never left behind any DNA evidence for the forensic teams to analyze, and he ended his rampage early before getting carried away, and never struck again. To put it simply, he had been extremely thorough, and had made the investigative team's work almost impossible. There was absolutely nothing to link anyone to the poisonings, and, as such, the identity of the vending machine killer remains a mystery to this very day. Their motive for slaying so many random innocents remains just as unclear. Many have theorized that the man behind the vending machine slayings wasn't actually a man at all, but a woman who specifically targeted men. The fact that 11 of the 12 victims were male surely can't be a coincidence. Oronomin C was specifically marketed towards a male consumer, and most of the vending machines that the killer struck were in so-called salaryman areas, near offices that had mostly male workers. The fact that the poisonings abruptly stopped after a female died could also be significant. The perp may have felt that they had made a mistake and decided to stop before accidentally taking the life of another woman. Still, that's just one hypothesis. Others have suggested that the perp may have actually been a student on university break. That could explain how they had time to travel the length and breadth of the country, and why the killing stopped around the time that university students went back to school. Ultimately, we don't know who was behind the slayings, and seeing how the statute of limitations ran out on this case back in 2000, we almost certainly never will. But, in all likelihood, the perpetrator is still out there, roaming the vending machine-lined streets of Japan, and you can't help but wonder what they feel every time they pass by one. Is it guilt or satisfaction? Located on Japan's Shikoku Island, Tokushima Prefecture is a popular getaway spot for hikers and nature lovers. The entire prefecture has a population of just 750,000 people, making it one of the least populated areas of the entire country. But back in 1989, this quiet and peaceful part of Japan was the setting of one of its darkest unsolved mysteries. On March 6th of that year, 4-year-old Shinya Matsuoka arrived in the town of Sadamitsu, Tokushima, with his parents and 2 siblings. The Matsuoka family had travelled all the way from Ibaraki to attend the funeral of Shinya's maternal grandmother, which was to take place the following day. They stayed at a relative's house just outside the town in the mountains. On the morning of the 7th, at around 8 AM, Shinya, his father Masanobu, and his 2-year-old brother all went for a walk around the local neighbourhood, which consisted of a few residential houses lining a road that led down into the main town. They didn't cross paths with many other people, other than a few field workers. After 10 minutes or so, the father, Masanobu, suggested they all head back, but Shinya was adamant that he wanted to walk for a bit longer. Masanobu said sure, but first they had to drop Shinya's brother back at the accommodation. The trio walked back to their relative's home. Leading up to the house was a 10-meter-long staircase. Masanobu carried Shinya's brother all the way to the top, with Shinya making his way up behind them. As Masanobu reached the entrance, he claims that he turned to see Shinya very close behind him at the top of the stairs. Masanobu stepped into the home and handed Shinya's 2-year-old brother over to his wife, something that took 20 seconds at most. It was at that point that Masanobu turned around and noticed that Shinya hadn't followed him into the house. He stepped onto the porch outside, and, to his horror, Shinya was nowhere to be seen. He wasn't on the stairs leading up to the house. He wasn't standing on the street below. In a matter of seconds, he had vanished into thin air. But that was impossible. Shinya had been right behind him. He'd seen him make it to the top of the stairs just moments prior. Masanobu only had his back turned for a few seconds at most. The whole family searched the entire property, both inside and out, but no trace of Shinya could be found anywhere. Within no time, a thorough search of the surrounding mountains was underway, with firefighters and police officers combing every square inch of the neighborhood. This search would continue for 3 months straight, but Shinya would never be found. At first, the authorities strongly believed that Shinya had wandered off by himself and gotten lost. The facts did all seem to suggest that was the case. After all, the area was quite remote, and the house the family were staying at was located at the end of the street. There was no reason for anyone who didn't live there to be there. Nobody outside the neighborhood knew the Matsuoka family was staying there either. The field workers, who were only 100 meters away from the scene of the incident, hadn't seen or heard any strange vehicles pass by when the boy disappeared. Neither Shinya's father nor mother heard a peep from the boy when he vanished, so even if some opportunist happened to be hiding in the bushes, it just wasn't plausible that he or she could snatch the boy up and make him disappear so stealthily in such a short space of time. But Shinya was a smart lad. He knew his parents' phone numbers by heart, and could even recite the address of the relative's house they were staying at. If he had wandered off and gotten lost, surely he could have found his way back, or asked someone for help. And though their relative's house was outside the main town, it wasn't like it was miles from civilization. There were still people living nearby, particularly to the east of where the family were staying. Was it possible that someone living there had taken Shinya? Chillingly, the night before he disappeared, a worried-looking Shinya ran up to his parents whilst inside the relative's house, and said, "He's looking for me. He's gonna find me." It's unclear whether that was just the imaginative ramblings of a child, or whether Shinya had actually seen someone outside his window that night. Now, here's where the plot really thickens. On March 16th, 9 days after Shinya went missing, the Matsuoka family received a mysterious phone call at their relative's house. Shinya's father, Masanobu, answered it. A female voice on the other end of the line asked him, "Is your wife there?" Masanobu passed the phone to his wife. "I am Mariko Nakahara's mother," the voice said. "My child is in Group Moon of the Seikei Kindergarten." Shinya's mother immediately recognized the name of the school. It's where Shinya's sister went to kindergarten, back in Ibaraki. But that was odd, she thought, since the woman on the other end of the line spoke with a distinct Tokushima accent. "We've all put together some money to support you. Where should we send it to? Are you returning home soon?" Shinya's mother told the woman that the family were returning to Ibaraki the following day. The family did return home, but they didn't hear back from the woman about the money. Shinya's mother felt uncomfortable calling up the school to ask about it, but after some time, she decided that she better make an inquiry. She phoned up the kindergarten and asked what the situation was with regards to the condolence fund. The principal of the school was confused to say the least, and told Shinya's mother that no such money had been collected that they knew about. Shinya's mother said there must be some kind of mistake, that Mariko Nakahara's mother had collected some money to help support them. "I'm sorry," replied the principal, "but no girl named Mariko Nakahara goes to school here." That's when it dawned on Shinya's mother. How on earth would one of the other mothers at the school have gotten a hold of her relative's phone number? That didn't make any sense at all. But whoever the mystery caller was, they knew that number. They knew the name of that kindergarten back in Ibaraki, and they spoke with that distinct Tokushima accent. Had Shinya's mother actually been speaking with the person who had taken her son? After learning that the condolence fund didn't exist, she immediately told her husband, Masanobu. His first instinct was that the mystery caller was the person holding their son captive. Thankfully, he had actually set up a recording device on the house's phone after Shinya vanished, and the call made by the mystery woman had been recorded onto a cassette. He contacted the authorities and gave them the only recording of the conversation. Suspiciously, the police never bothered to investigate who had made the call, and somehow lost the recording that Masanobu had given them. To this day, we still don't know who made that bizarre phone call, or why. In the years that followed, numerous reported sightings of Shinya were made to the authorities. In May of 1989, just 2 months after the boy went missing, a man was seen walking with a child who bore a strong resemblance to Shinya on a beach in Tokushima. When the witness tried to get a good look at the boy's face, the man turned him away and rushed the boy into a waiting white vehicle. The beach where this sighting occurred is an area where North Korean ships are known to pass. In 1990, 2 alleged sightings of the boy were reported. One came from a housewife who was certain that she had seen Shinya in Tokushima City. The other came from a man in Yamagata who believed that he had seen Shinya outside a shopping mall. The father, Masanobu, who had quit his job to search for his missing son, personally investigated both of these leads and handed out missing person flyers to people at both locations. Locals outside the mall in Yamagata confirmed that they had in fact seen the boy with an unidentified man. In 1995, an elderly man in Hokkaido disturbingly reported that he knew someone who had, quote, received a boy named Shinya as a gift. In 1997, a woman met a young boy who strongly resembled Shinya at a train station in Yokohama. The boy had marks on his wrists and looked sickly and unwell. He told the woman that he was being poorly treated by an older man. She gave the boy her number and told him to call her if he ever needed help. The boy called her just once after that, but she was unable to find out where he was living. Finally, in 1998, a cashier in Chugoku reported seeing a boy with marks on his wrists, shopping with what looked like a typical Yakuza type. The Yakuza appeared to be keeping a close eye on the boy, who strongly resembled the missing poster of Shinya. The cashier told his boss about the situation, and they both went to get a good look at the boy. But by that point, he and the Yakuza were already gone. None of these supposed sightings led to any new breakthroughs. Unfortunately, for the past 33 years, Shinya Matsuoka's whereabouts and well-being remain a mystery, as do the circumstances surrounding his vanishing. Perhaps the boy's curious nature got the better of him. Perhaps he somehow ran off in the space of 20 seconds, and his remains have been lost in the steep Tokushima mountains for the past 3 decades. Perhaps someone had been watching him from afar that morning, and somehow swept him up in the short space of time his father's back was turned. A sick neighbor, or a local worker. Or perhaps it's a mix of both. The boy walked off by himself, only to run into the wrong person. The first theory makes the most sense logically. After all, nobody saw or heard anything or anyone suspicious when the boy disappeared, and Masanobu may have had his back turned for longer than 20 seconds like he claimed. But given the mysterious phone call to Shinya's mother, and all the sightings that were reported in the subsequent years, it's hard to rule out foul play. Unfortunately, whatever did happen to Shinya, the outcome was either death or a fate worse than it. In 2018, it seemed as if a miracle had occurred. A man named Ryuto Wada appeared on national television, claiming to be Shinya Matsuoka, the boy who had vanished so many years before. He was the correct age, and looked just like the missing lad. Shinya's parents were filled with hope that their son was alive and well, and that they were about to be reunited with him 3 decades after he had been taken from them. But, alas, a DNA test confirmed that this was just a cruel hoax. And, to this day, the Matsuoka family are still searching for the truth about their son's fate. Just before the video ends, I'd like to say a huge thank you to all of my supporters here on YouTube and over on Patreon, especially my biggest supporters. The deck of cards: Mrs. Yvonne Rankin, Brad Hammer 33, Zane, The Only Dorita, Taylor&Monica Gruenk, Philip Wester, Peter Logdrach, Natalie Escobedo, Monica Mendoza, Linden Witebsky, Leonardo Martinez, Larry Mattingly, Infamous-senpapi, Ian Biluck, Grace Archie, Gina Valera, George Lopez, Fortnite Girl 666, Dustin and Tiffany Vanderpool, Connor Lothan, Colin Monsmer, Chief Cochuaque, Azrael Warakai, asiamina, Anya Yekaterina Faustov, Alex Greensall, Clayton Thompson, Jessie Jug, Peyton Trolling, Itai Alon, Jacquelynn Guevara-Phelan, Torpid Chair 1139, Lydia Cumo, and Nephus 1988. Thank you guys so much for your continued support. Be sure to check out those Alicia Masquerade plushes, and you'll be hearing from me again very soon. Until then, you all stay spooky. And remember, the best things happen in the dark.